the moment my boss looked away while saying, "This is just one dinner." I knew something wasn't right. People don't avoid eye contact when something is simple. They don't tap their fingers nervously against the table, adjust their sleeves twice in 30 seconds, and clear their throat like the words are heavier than they should be.
You're watching SK Stories, where powerful stories of kindness, courage, and second chances remind us that even a small act of compassion can change someone's life. If you believe kindness still matters, hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs it today, comment below, and subscribe to SK Stories for more inspiring stories.
Everyone admired but barely understood. His name was Adrian Crosswell. To most people in the office, he was intimidatingly calm, almost mysterious. The kind of leader who rarely raised his voice, but somehow commanded an entire room the moment he stepped inside. To me, he had always been different. Not warmer, exactly, but observant. He noticed details others ignored. When my father passed away 2 years earlier, he was the only executive who quietly sent flowers without announcing it in a company email or turning it into a public gesture. When I stayed late to finish a project, he sometimes walked through the floor at night and simply nodded in silent appreciation. Still, our relationship had always been professional, until that evening. The office was nearly empty when Adrian appeared at my door. The sunset was spilling orange light across the glass walls, and most employees had already gone home. I was finishing a report when he leaned against the doorframe, looking slightly uncertain. That alone was unusual. "This is just one dinner," he said calmly. His voice was steady, but his eyes flickered away from mine for a split second. That's when I tilted my head and asked quietly, "Then why are you nervous?" For a brief moment, he froze. It wasn't the reaction of a powerful CEO used to controlling every conversation. It was the reaction of someone caught without an answer. He exhaled slowly, almost like he had been holding his breath. Then he smiled, though the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "And quat maybe, because I am asking someone whose opinion matters, and quat," he said. That answer lingered in the air long after he walked away. I tried to focus on my work afterward, but the thought kept circling my mind. Adrian Crosswell didn't do anything without purpose. Every meeting, every decision, every step he took inside the company was calculated. So why dinner? And why with me? The restaurant he chose was quiet and elegant, one of those places where soft music floats through dim lighting and conversations feel private, even in a crowded room. When I arrived, he was already seated at a table by the window, wearing a dark suit that looked as precise as everything else about him. Yet the moment he saw me walking toward the table, something softened in his expression, almost like relief. Dinner started normally enough. We talked about work, upcoming projects, and the company's expansion plans. Anyone watching from another table would probably assume it was just a business meeting, but beneath the surface, something felt different. Adrian kept pausing before answering simple questions, as if weighing his words more carefully than usual. He studied the tablecloth patterns, adjusted his glass, and occasionally glanced at me with a thoughtful look that seemed heavier than the conversation itself. That same quiet nervousness from earlier hadn't disappeared. If anything, it had grown. Halfway through the meal, I realized something else. The famous confidence everyone admired in him, the calm authority that filled conference rooms, was missing. Instead, he looked like someone standing at the edge of a difficult decision. It made the atmosphere strangely emotional, even though nothing dramatic had happened yet. As the evening continued, the conversation slowly drifted away from business. He asked about my childhood, about the small town where I grew up, about my mother who still lived there, questions that weren't casual at all. Questions people usually asked when they genuinely wanted to understand someone. And for reasons I couldn't fully explain, I answered honestly. I told him about the years my family struggled financially, about how hard my father worked before he passed away, and how moving to the city had been terrifying at first. I spoke about the pressure of proving myself in a company where everyone seemed smarter, faster, and more confident. Through it all, Adrian listened quietly. Not the way executives listen during meetings, but the way someone listens when every word matters. At one point, I noticed something unusual in his expression. His usual composed mask had cracked just slightly, revealing something deeper. Respect, maybe even admiration. It made my chest tighten in a way I wasn't prepared for. Finally, as dessert plates were cleared away, the silence between us grew longer. The restaurant lights reflected softly in the window beside him, and outside, the city had turned into a sea of glowing streetlights. That's when he finally spoke again, slowly, carefully. He admitted something I never expected. Running a company, he said, meant living inside a constant storm of decisions, expectations, and pressure. People assumed leaders always knew exactly what they were doing. But the truth was, sometimes leadership felt like walking alone through a dark hallway, hoping the next step wouldn't collapse beneath you. For years, he carried that weight without letting anyone see it. But recently, things had changed. The company's rapid growth had created new challenges. Investors were demanding bigger risks, competitors were closing in, and the responsibility of thousands of employees rested on his shoulders. And somewhere along the way, he realized something that frightened him. He was losing the part of himself that once believed in the human side of success. That's when he looked directly at me. Not like a boss looking at an employee, but like a person asking another human being for honesty. He said he had been watching how I handled difficult situations at work, how I treated colleagues with patience instead of ego, how I stayed late not for recognition but because the team depended on it. And in a strange way, it reminded him of the values he once had when he first built the company. The silence that followed was heavy, because suddenly the purpose of this dinner became clear. It wasn't about romance. It wasn't about authority. It was about trust. Adrian Crosswell, the man everyone believed had everything under control, had invited me to dinner because he needed something simple yet rare. A reminder of what truly mattered. For the first time that night, the nervousness in his eyes finally made sense. He wasn't afraid of the dinner. He was afraid of losing the humanity behind his success. The rest of the evening felt different after that. The tension slowly dissolved into something calmer, something real. Two people sitting across from each other, no longer separated by titles or office hierarchies. Just two individuals sharing the quiet weight of their journeys. When we finally stood to leave, the night air outside felt cool and peaceful. The city lights reflected in the distance like scattered stars. Adrian looked strangely lighter, as if speaking those thoughts aloud had removed something heavy from his chest. Before we parted ways, he said something that stayed with me long after the evening ended. He said that sometimes leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. Sometimes it's about being brave enough to ask the right person for perspective. And that night, somehow, that person had been me. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that even the strongest people sometimes carry silent struggles, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so more people can hear stories that truly matter. And before the story ends, I have a small request for you. In the comments below, tell me if you have ever met someone powerful who turned out to be more human than you expected. Because sometimes the most surprising thing about people isn't their success. It's their vulnerability. As Adrian walked toward his car that night, he turned once more and gave a small nod. Not the confident nod of a CEO, but the grateful nod of someone who finally felt understood. And in that quiet moment, I realized something important. Sometimes a dinner isn't just dinner. Sometimes it's the beginning of understanding the person behind the title.